Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch with a Local. And I'd like to welcome our guest today, Dr. Heather Holmes Ross, who's the co-owner of the Artisan Cafe up at Blackwood and the Mayor of the City of Mitcham. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you very much, John.
Yes, and as we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which each of us meet today. For me, and probably for many of you, this is the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past and present. And I'll just start by asking Heather a couple of questions, and then the way this session works today is I'd encourage you to use the chat feature on Zoom. If you look down to the bottom of your screen, there's a chat where you can actually type some questions. And so if you'd like to type questions as we go along, then we can start asking Heather your questions rather than just worry about mine. Okay, so let's begin. So Heather, tell me, I'm intrigued to know, how did a molecular researcher become an award-winning cafe owner? And how did a cafe owner become mayor?
That's a really interesting question, John. And I'm actually giving a talk to a group of people down at Flinders about this later in the year. And the talk is called Accidental Mayor. And I think that's probably how it happened. So I was doing research in physical chemistry down at Flinders using lasers to look at how molecules flew apart. And I met my lovely husband, who was a chef. He was the executive chef out at Qantas, and he was looking for a change of life. And I was coming to the end of, I was doing a PhD. I was coming to the end of that. The money was running out at Flinders. Qantas was looking like it was going to close its kitchen. So we decided that we would change our directions. And so we bought the then Aubergine Cafe, Aubergine Fine Foods, and renamed it the Artisan. And what we wanted to do was to live up to the Artisan name, so create beautiful things, high quality food and beverages, and it made in really small batches in the traditional manner, which is what the contemporary meaning of Artisan is. And pans out that people really like that. And so we went on to win South Australian Cafe of the Year 3 times, and then National Cafe of the Year 1 year. Amazing. None of that was planned. We were just following our ideals, I suppose, and ended up doing that. How did I become mayor? Well, I became involved with created a kind of shop local campaign called Totally Locally Blackwood. It's an idea out of the UK, and the idea was to give a platform to local independent businesses and ask people in the community to shop locally rather than online and in the big supermarkets. And I think I got involved really heavily with the business community, but also with the local community doing that. And then someone threw in the idea of being mayor. And at the same time, with Totally Locally, I came down and spoke to the council, and I said, you know, we're doing all this work as a group of business owners, and we'd really like a few things. We'd like, in principle, support from council, and we'd like someone to liaise with, because we were trying to, you know, have community banquets and markets and that kind of stuff. We needed help working out how to do that, how to close roads, that kind of thing. And we wanted $500 to help us with our advertising, and the council said no to all 3 of those requests, and I was just absolutely gobsmacked. I was like, you are actually kidding. Here's a group of business owners trying to get themselves, you know, trying to build themselves, make Mitcham a better place, and you're saying no. And I think that's what really set me off. I thought, you know what, I'm going to run for council. I'm so cross, I'm not even going to write a letter. I'm going to run for council. And then people kind of started prodding and saying, why don't you try to be mayor? And I did feel that perhaps the things that I wanted to do as mayor wouldn't gel very well with the old mayor's ideas. So I thought I'd run, but never, ever in a million years was I going to win. I was completely safe. So hence the accidental.
Well, congratulations on
I think.
the achievements of that. Now it does lead us into, it's, I guess, careful what you pray for is the situation, because now you're mayor at a situation where many small businesses are doing it exceptionally tough.
Yeah.
And all spheres of government are responding in different ways. Tell us what the councils are doing. And maybe there's two parts. Well, what's the experience of small business through this time, and how does council respond to that?
So I suppose it depends which small business. So some of us, so I am in a cafe business, which makes life quite difficult. When did I become mayor? I became mayor in November 2018. There we go. Just answering the chat on the side.
Very impressive.
So there's a butcher that's close to me who said to me, "Oh, Heather, I'm almost embarrassed at the amount of money we're making." So there are some small businesses that are doing really, really well. The hardware store's just kicking ass, but then there's, you know, other businesses, you know, travel agents, for example, cafes, whatever, that are doing it really tough. I suppose council, it's difficult for council to do a lot, but there are some things that we are definitely doing. So we've what have we done? We've said for all of next year, any ratepayer or business that's been negatively affected by COVID can have a 10% reduction in their rates. So there's a lot of councils that are going out saying we're going to have a 0% rate rise. And what we're doing here is saying we're going lower than that if you've been affected. So we're saying minus 10% if you've been affected. But this is targeted. So if you haven't been affected, and if you're one of those people that are still okay, then we're still expecting, you know, a small increase in rates to cover what we're doing. It's become quite political, this idea of the percentage rate rise. We've had lots of input from state and federal government, and what they're asking councils to do is to target their rate relief, so target the packages so that we're only giving relief to people that need it. And then they're asking us to spend. They're just saying, well, we have a huge role to play at the local government level in stimulating the economy by bringing all our infrastructure projects forward. So that's what we're trying to do. We've brought forward, I think it's $4 million of projects that we were going to do later in the year. They're happening now. And then we're trying to bring forward, for example, the Blackwood hub. We would really like to get that done quite soon. So the new Blackwood Library Community Centre on the Waite Street Reserve. And we have a total of $36 million of projects that we could bring forward, but to do those, we need about $20 million worth of input from other layers of government. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay, and then for the Blackwood Hub, is there was some funding allocated to that? Is there enough to actually move forward with that? So
there's $5 million federal funding that we definitely have. We are making the assumption that we will get an equal amount from the state government, and then we will put in around about 10 million as a council. But we have those two properties, the current library and the current garden centre that council owns. So at some point we would sell those off to offset that cost. So yeah, okay. we think we can do it. And what other priority projects would there be to stimulate? Like you talked about $36 million of potential projects. Are there any others that? There's always sports clubs. Sports clubs always need things. So there was a couple of funds that were given during the federal election campaign. So we've just announced a refurbishment of Kingswood Oval, which is the one down here at Unley next door to Mitcham Girls High School. So we're refurbishing their club rooms. The Blackwood, what are they called? Sturt Lions are wanting to build a club room and an artificial pitch up at Corinna, which is near the skate park on Shepherd's Hill Road. So we're looking at bringing that forward and making a considerable contribution to that. That hasn't been decided, but that's what we're looking at. I can get my agenda out and read you off all the other things that we're looking at.
Well, that's what I was just interested to know, were any sort of standout, like the
There's one that I'm particularly fond of, which is a public realm project. And what we're trying to do is trying to tie the city together with matching or similar street furniture and signage and that kind of thing. And so we've put that up to bring that forward. And what I'm hoping is that we can also include in that starting to use Aboriginal naming and include Aboriginal history in the signage that we're using around the city. So that's part of a far bigger project that we're hoping to get off the ground, which is a reconciliation action plan dealing with how we reconcile with Indigenous Australians.
Okay. Got a couple of questions coming in, which is thank you very much for posting them. Alan's asked, do you believe becoming a councillor is generally the most effective way to achieve community change? For those who don't want to stand for council, what is the second most effective way?
I think it is one way of definitely of achieving change. Another way is just to know a councillor and to nag them.
Or to join a webinar with one.
Or join a webinar. Yeah, I definitely all levels of government listen to the squeaky wheel. You can't help but do that because that's what you hear. And so if you don't want to be part of the decision-making process, which is what happens at council, you're always able to lobby. And I think that lobbying is perhaps tends to feel like it's underrated, but it really isn't. Like if you're over and over and over again, either something will happen or we'll just stop returning your calls. But if it's a reasonable, if your ideas are reasonable and are able to be achieved, then lobbying is a really good way of going about it, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Jim has a question. How is the renewable energy on council facilities initiatives going?
So we've got 4 happening at the moment, which is the Mitcham. So we're putting solar panels on 4 of our buildings, and they're the ones that we're using the most energy. So they're the ones that make sense to start with. So one is the Mitcham Royal Library, the depot where all the outdoor crew work. And there are 2 others and I can't remember what they are. So that's where we're starting. You remember that I ran, or you might not, I ran in the election saying that there was an idea that I really liked, which was about giving people, all residents and businesses, access to free solar power. And I still strongly believe that that's a great idea. What we decided to do was, rather than start with residents, was to start with, in our own backyard. So putting solar panels on council-owned properties, which saves all the ratepayers because we're saving, the council saving money. And it did. I was a little shocked that wasn't already done. There's a few solar panels on the Civic Centre where I am now, but I would have thought, in that it's kind of an economic no-brainer, that they would have been everywhere, but they're not. So we're starting there. And we've at the moment engaged a consultant a consulting group to tell us the best ways or various ways that we can reduce our emissions throughout the city, both in what we do as a council in our operations, but also what we can do to get the community to help the community lower their emissions. And so we've just at the beginning of conversations with that group, but it's definitely something that we're working on and I'm really, really passionate about.
And to follow on this, to tie in the stimulus discussion, your $36 million of
yes,
potential investment, a lot of people are saying that we should be having a green investment in this stimulus. Is that part of council's consideration for this? If the feds and the state are asking you to invest,
yes,
to what extent are you considering green investments?
Yes, we are. To what extent? In my mind, a huge extent. I think that it opens up so many doors for doing those kinds of greening things. And what I find really interesting is that we've been able to go into war mode, to get the economy back on the road coming out of this pandemic. And I wonder why we couldn't do the same thing to help mitigate climate change. Anyway, I'm hoping that we can combine the two. We are, and I suppose that's why we're talking to our consultant man and finding out the best way that we can do our greening. Is that a great answer?
Thank you for your answer.
Maybe not.
Sorry.
There's lots of ideas that are being tossed around, and it's budget time at the moment. So this is the time when we decide where we are going to put our money. And having announced a climate emergency, we're really well placed within the chamber to argue that anything that we do must be looked at through the lens of climate change. So that's, even though I suppose outwardly it doesn't seem that we have done a lot on the climate change issue, we really are, because we do have that lens, and so it guides our thinking, and it can be used as a tool in the chamber, and it has been.
Oh, okay, excellent. Alan's got another question. Irrespective of the constitutional federation, my gosh, we're going into the big picture here.
Yep.
Is 3 levels of government the best system for Australia, or large councils working directly with the national government?
That is a really interesting question. And I'm not sure that I have a definitive answer. Large councils, I don't really like, because I think the beauty of local government is that you are so close to your community. You know, like I can go outing and abouting, and I know many, many members of the City of Mitcham. And so it's quite reasonable for me and my other elected members to know exactly what's going on. And I think that allows us to govern better. And, you know, like, so Brisbane, City of Brisbane has, you probably know, one huge mega council. And I'm not sure that works as well. And I'll get to the 3 tiers of government in a minute. On the flip side, because we have the council arrangement the way that it is in the City of Mitcham, we have this ongoing pressure between the hills and the plains needs and rate base, and that is a continual friction. And if we were part of a larger council, presumably that would happen to a lesser degree. So pros and cons. Do we need state? Ooh, I don't know. Could we have federal government but not larger councils? Could we have federal government and then smaller councils? I think that would be my preference. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of things that we deal with on a state level that don't perhaps need to be state run. Education, I think, is a big one. Why do we need each state having a different Department of Education, a different curriculum? It just seems insane. Driving rules, why aren't they the same across Australia? So I think that there is maybe a place for a lessened state government, or maybe just get rid, don't know.
and it's a perennial question, but it's interesting now to see the National Cabinet.
Yes.
And in a way, like maybe I'll put to you, do you think that there are better decisions being made by the consensus of that cabinet than the hierarchical sort of structure of government that we've had?
I think that they're making good decisions, but I mean, it's kind of easy because they have to listen to the experts, and they're only making decisions about one thing. So yeah, it's easy for them right now. I do really like the National Cabinet. What I'm not liking is that we tend to hear, and the news tends to report, what has been happening in the other states, and it's confusing when you have you're hearing things that are happening on the national level, but they're not being implemented or enforced on a state level, because it's our commissioners of police that have to decide whether or not that happens. And so there's this, I suppose, the myth that in South Australia we were only supposed to be in groups of 2. That was never a thing. We were always allowed to be in groups of 10 because we're very well behaved in South Australia. But people in South Australia, a lot of them were very confused when they saw groups of larger than 2, because they were saying, well, you're not allowed to. We were allowed to. It's just, yeah. So that was a tricky one.
Now, we have drifted into some big picture things, but we've got some more questions here. Danielle's got a question. Hi, Heather. Springbank is suffering a reputation issue in our community. How can council help promote the school and its relationship to promote input into the review based on facts, not government propaganda?
Oh, Danny, that's a great question. I think, so I'm on the review board, which is nice for me. And I agree that Springbank is suffering a reputation issue, which is probably not the fault of the school. It's the past schools perhaps that have had a bad reputation, and whether that was deserved or not, I don't know. But certainly Springbank Secondary College has, in my mind, a far better reputation than Pasadena or Dawes Road. What can council do to promote the school? We will make, council will make a submission to the review for sure. I think it's important though, when we're making submissions, everyone in the community, to make sure that they're being made within the terms of reference, because I suppose it's no point submitting something that isn't going to be taken into account. So what we're looking at mainly is the educational, social, and what's the other one? Come on. The three effects of closing it down: economic, social, educational. There you go. I got three effects of closing the school. If submissions go any further than that, I think that will influence the review panel if the submissions are too ridiculous, I suppose. So what we can do here, I think, is to write a really considered and succinct response and allow the community to see what our response is, so that it's based in fact, not in hearsay, and we're sticking within the terms of reference. Is that an okay answer? Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Is that what you'd like me to do?
Got a few more questions.
Yes.
Get through all of them. From Jim, have Blackwood traders and other similar groups been able to tap council support for local initiatives? And I guess this goes back to your local initiative that got you into the council. And are there any current state programs to support Main Street retail centres?
Jim, you're tapping into a place in my heart. So before COVID started, I had been discussing with the Blackwood traders in particular, only because I know them better, the idea of asking council to levy commercial rates so that we could create a traders group. And a lot of traders in Blackwood were really supportive of that idea, because they can see that that's what happens down at Unley Road, King William Road, Stirling, Adelaide City. They all have traders groups, and so associated with that, they have economic development people and marketing people and events people, and so they're able to promote themselves in a way that we're not. And so the Blackwood traders were saying, yes, we would like to do that, and we have within the city, we have a rates review coming up, and that was something that I was going to bring to council and say, this is something that we should do. So then COVID came along, and so my suggestion to council was, well, in that this is something that at least the Blackwood traders want, could we pay for that for a year to get our traders up and running and ready to go, because all the other cities will be having their groups doing things. Could the City of Mitcham pay to do that for our precincts just for this year, and then see how we're going, and if all the traders are liking it, we can offload the cost of it to the traders, when we come out of this. Anyway, I brought that motion to council last week. I wasn't allowed to speak to it, obviously, because I have a huge material conflict of interest, because I am a street trader. And it was adjourned, so it wasn't passed, but it wasn't defeated. And so that will come back next Tuesday. I was really disappointed that it didn't go through. I thought it was a no-brainer. I thought, to help our businesses is really the most important thing for businesses that council can do, is to help through promotion. but maybe I'm thinking differently to other councillors. There's there's no initiatives for Main Street Report. There's support. There are payments from the state government for people, businesses that have been affected, up to $10,000, and the federal government, if you're COVID affected, there's various initiatives there. Tonight there's a special meeting to consider waiving fourth quarter rates for any businesses that have been affected. So if you've had to close, we would totally waive fourth quarter rates, which start on Monday or Sunday. And then if you've had a decrease, so 30% drop or more, then we would reduce fourth quarter rates by 50%. So that goes to council tonight. I'm hoping that it will just fly through, but again, I won't be able to be part of the discussion because I have a material conflict of interest. So yes, I am trying very hard to make it happen. I'm hoping that my fellow councillors will support me.
Sounds like you're a lobbyist rather than a councillor in this particular situation.
It does, doesn't it? And that's, yeah, see, that brings in a whole new thing. How much can you lobby when you have a conflict of interest? It's a bloody tricky one.
Yes.
Yes.
At least an advocate, advocates, probably the...
Okay, let's call it an advocate, because in my defence, what country town doesn't have the mayor owning, the local car dealership? Like, it's often that mayors own businesses within their councils. So.
Yes. Robert's got a question. What community initiatives would the council like to see to continue or be initiated to increase our social capability and resilience as we move into recovery from the pandemic, such as programs supporting and improving mental health?
That is a really great question. I have to say, council tend not to do a lot in the mental health area because that's it's governed by state government. What we have been doing is a lot of work, though, with loneliness and isolation, particularly with our elderly members of the community. And I would hope that would continue. And so an example of something that has happened is our people were creating knitting groups for older people to bring them together, and these were to start in April. So face-to-face knitting groups, just to get people together so they can chitty-chat, and that couldn't happen because of the COVID restrictions. So instead, our community workers took out packs to all these individuals, and they were knitting poppies. So included was red and black wool and knitting needles and a pattern for poppies. And so the idea is that they would knit poppies for Anzac Day. And one lady knitted 50 of them and then distributed them to people in her street to pop on their houses for Anzac Day. And I think that's just such a lovely story of people altering how services are delivered and then having an accidental, brilliant flow on into the community. So I think, once again, Mitcham hasn't been active in the spaces of economic development. They haven't been particularly active. They have been active in community engagement and community development, but we could do a lot more, but at the end of the day, it's always based in rates. And so, I'm not doing this very well, are they? Am I? There are pushes to have more people in community development running the community centres, that type of thing. Again, hopefully, when this comes to council for debate around rates, our councillors will see how important it has been to have these community initiatives, and they'll vote for them, I hope.
Thank you.
You could lobby them too.
That's right, we've all got our lobbying jobs to do.
Now that we have, 11 new activists.
We're just about to wrap up. So my last questions are about... A lot of people have discussed that this time we're in, this extraordinary time within, that there are some new things about it and there's some things that we'd like to get back to. So when the pandemic ends, what would you like to hang on to? What changes would you like to hang on to? And what are you itching to get back?
This is really interesting because I had pre-knowledge of this question, guys. So it's not just, I'm really happy to tell you this one. The things that I'm so excited about and want to keep are the doubling of the dole and shelter for the homeless. I think they are just so necessary within our society. And when we give people enough, I think that we will see them bloom, you know, and I hate that we live in a society where we persecute people that can't get jobs when we live in an economic system that demands that people can't get jobs. I mean, that's the thinking. Anyway, so I love that and I want to keep hold of that. I'm loving the slower pace of life. I'm liking that where I feel like I'm connecting with people more. I suppose it's because Easter came in the middle of this and I decided to create a front lawn, which I'm calling my COVID lawn. And I was doing lots of work in the front yard and people were walking past. And I always say hello to people because I'm the mayor and I think they'll think I'm a snob if I don't. So I go, hello. And usually people, well, some people just kind of hang their heads and who's that weirdo? But people were walking with their families and they were all saying hi back and stopping for a chitty chat, and it was lovely. And so I love that sense of community that we've managed to, well, it feels like we've managed to create, and I would really, really like that to stay. I think what we've realised is that we really miss people, and being pushed together, it's kind of like this wartime feeling that we're all working through together, and I just really like that. I love the initiatives that the things that are happening, people thinking about how we can do things differently. So like innovative and creative alternatives like lunch with a local. I think it's prodded the creativeness in us, and I really want to maintain that. What I don't want to continue is council, what I want back is council meetings where I can see all my elected members. It's so hard doing it, you know, through Zoom, and I really love to see their beautiful little faces in front of me. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm really, really looking forward to just being around people. I really like people. I can't cope with the not hug. Like that's, I didn't even know I was a hugger. It turns out I am, and now I'm really missing the hug. I'm missing, you know, citizenship ceremonies. I'm missing all the things where people are. So I want that back. Apart from that, not much. And I've got this feeling that it's like with, you know, when you're on holiday and you don't want it to end. And there's parts of COVID that make me feel like that. I'm enjoying that. And I think, oh, do I really want to go back to normal? But when we do, you know, in a couple of weeks, we'll be back to normal. But I think it is really important to try and hang on to those precious things, like the community that we've rediscovered.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. And thanks for all your insights today, Heather. That was fantastic. And for all the questions we received as well.
Yes, thanks. Great questions. You got me on my toes, but that's okay.
So thanks very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, John. Thank you, viewing team.